As a butterfly goes through many changes in the cycle of life, so too does the woman in recovery. From the caterpillar to the butterfly, we can watch an amazing transformation. The 7 women in this video have allowed us, through their time, courage, and honesty, to witness this transformation process in the cycle of addiction and recovery. Today, women of all ages have more autonomy and opportunities than ever before. This is evident in both their personal and professional lives. Professionally, women now work as engineers, firefighters, lawyers, physicians, and police officers. Personally, women are engaged in a number of activities that awaken and promote their spiritual, emotional, and physical selves. Women are jumping in and making healthy activities an integral part of their lives, including well-balanced diets, regular checkups with their healthcare provider, and attending to their intimate relationships and sexual well-being. Nevertheless, there are stumbling blocks on the road to opportunity and autonomy for women. Foremost among these is the problem of alcohol and drugs. Although women have reached levels of equality in many areas, the physical differences between men and women put women at a greater risk for developing problems with alcohol and drugs over a shorter period of time. What starts out as seemingly harmless fun can lead to complications for women. When the disease of addiction strikes a woman, she becomes vulnerable and her opportunities shrink or disappear into a void. When that happens, a woman must take the first and hardest step, admit she is suffering from addiction. It is crucial that she seek help, begin treatment, recover what she lost during her time of addiction, and renew her life. Join us now as we listen to these 7 women and the wisdom they offer from their journey in recovery. There are many factors that may lead women down the road into addiction. These include relationships with friends or partners, traumatic experiences such as sexual assault or physical abuse, or being raised in an environment where drugs and alcohol are commonplace. Whatever the roots of their addiction may be, these women hide a deep pain behind the use of the chemical that numbs them.
I got drunk when I was 9 years old for the first time.
I think I got drunk my first time when I was probably 16 or 17. And actually it made me feel pretty good. It made me feel like I could be free or be me, you know, because I didn't feel comfortable who I was, or I wasn't really accepted in my eyes. So it helped me to be open and be carefree and be a part of something.
When I was 14, I was raped violently by a man who was 36. Since that event, I started drinking. I drank right after school. You know, I hadn't tested with marijuana yet. That was like 14, and I just, vodka was my, you know, my drink of choice. I think it went from self-medication to like just self-abuse, because I felt, because of the way that I was raped, that I wasn't worth anything, that I was put on this earth for male pleasure, and that I had to serve my duty in the prison that I was born into. I didn't tell anyone about the rape, and I think that helped me to cover up my alcoholism in the future.
I was in the Army in my early years of drinking and addiction, and there it was easy for me to drink. All the women did it, all the men did it, everybody did it. It was a world of drinking and drugging, and, well, not drugging so much, but drinking was completely acceptable. And there was a small group that used drugs. So we just, you know, it was acceptable for us to do that.
I was then in an abusive marriage my husband was using, and then the mother-in-law that I became very close to died of cancer within the next year. My addiction started with him. We used together, although it became apparent that he didn't want me to use because I was using some of his drugs too. So we had a relationship that was pretty dysfunctional, with both of us using and trying to raise a child. It became an abusive relationship. He started using cocaine. And so then, I got into the cycle of the drugs would wear off, so I would feel bad. So I would take drugs again to make that feeling go away, of feeling bad, but also of feeling loved.
In addition to the secrets a woman has locked inside herself and the reasons she has gone from use to abuse, she finds herself with yet another problem, a double standard that is applied to her simply because she is a woman. Society judges her on a different standard than her male counterpart. She is not allowed the same latitude of behavior and is seen as immoral, unladylike, or worse.
I think women in general are supposed to have a more outwardly respect. They're supposed to demand respect as a lady.
I definitely think there's a double standard. I did my drinking in the 50s and the 60s, but I don't think it's really changed that much for alcohol. Women are not supposed to show the effects of any kind of alcohol or be too loud and rowdy in public places like bars, and I don't see that that's changed. I think that they're looked on differently. It's like they're giving people the right to take advantage of them, and I don't know how to deal with that. It's something that hasn't really changed very much as far as I'm concerned. The women that I see coming into recovery now are still saying basically the same things that I said, and that's that they go to a party, and if a guy gets a little bit loud and drunk, he's funny or okay, or one of the guys or something. But if a woman does, if she does, she's looked on differently and usually hit on.
Men who drink are considered macho and are considered manly and all of those positive things that men are supposed to be in this culture, and women are not. Their values are, I think, considered lower if they drink and get drunk, if they have sex while they're drinking, if they have sex after they've gotten drunk. And I think that that's not the same with men. I think that it's not considered the same in our society, men doing the same things.
I remember just kind of growing up with the image that a woman who drank heavy on TV, on anything else, was always masculinized, kind of turned into something, the big, broady woman who was drinking in the bar, wanting to be male. I would learn later how that impacted my life, especially as a lesbian. But it was an image that women who drank too much either were luscious or were completely masculinized. They became these butch entities that were scary to men. And that was the image I saw in the double standard.
The image that women have when men or other people look at them, it's worse than a man. Like, compared to a man drinking, it doesn't seem as bad, but women, because we drink, and then you get the following accusations of, that we party too much and we have kids and we sleep around, and it's more wrong for women than it is for men.
I think society, looking at a woman who is a drug addict, looks at you in a much different way than a man who is a drug addict. I think when you look at a woman, you automatically think mother, and you think about her children, and she talks about her children, and you think about what impact that's had on her child. For men, the addiction, although I think the addiction to men and women does the same thing to a family, does the same thing to your children and friends. I think that society doesn't look at it, doesn't think that there's that much of an impact. it's changing. I see it changing, but I still think that there's a difference.
Besides the stigma of being a woman who drinks too much or is addicted to drugs, some women must endure the added stigma that comes from the myths and stereotypes about their own culture.
I think the one thing that I thought about was being an alcoholic was all of the rumors that you hear about Indians are drunks and Indians, all they do is drink and party. And sometimes I had seen things on TV that portrayed Indians as drunken Indians. You've seen stickers that said drunken Indians, Indians are drunk. And so it was really hard for me to even accept that I was an Indian when I first got sober. I didn't look at my culture or believe in any culture that was on the reservation. And that's where I started my sobriety, was on the reservation, and I learned the culture and I started to see things that I never seen in my life.
I would take that question and hate to, but I would have to just look at that in, as far as double standards go, as far as races of people. I know what's accepted for, let's say, the white community or the black community as far as being addicted. It's more readily accepted that, as far as my perception anyway, that it's more expected or accepted that you'll find black women or black men that are quote unquote addicted, you know, and that it's okay, so to say.
Even though a woman may understand that she is addicted, she may delay admitting it to her family and friends. She continues to hide because of the shame and the fears that are real and potentially damaging to herself as a woman or mother.
I was addicted. That was, oh no, that was a horrible thing to, you know, just to admit to myself. And I didn't want to let go of a lot of things. You know, at the beginning parts, you know, at first it starts out, it's kind of fun or whatever, you're hanging out, or, you know, but if you cross that line of into addiction, you know, it's another story.
I think there's a lot of fears. I think every woman fears the fact that, you know, she will be judged. I think, for one thing, she'll be judged as that she has that she's masculinized, you know, that she is, that if she drinks too much, if she behaves too hearty as an alcoholic, that she's no longer a woman. You know, that's that double standard playing into it.
I know that one of the fears they had of inpatient treatment was that they would lose their kids. That admitting that they had a problem was worse to them than having the problem, because I think, you know, it isn't just denial. You think you're covering up. You think you're doing an okay job. I know even with myself, my standards just got lower and lower, so I could keep, you know, maintaining that I was doing a good job.
Well, the thing for me, the most important thing for me that kept me from admitting it was my children.
For the women that I've come in contact with in the program, that they had a lot of fear because they don't want their children to know, they don't want their husband's parents to know, they don't want their parents to know, they don't want members of their church, you know, that are people at work. I think just in general, calling yourself an alcoholic it automatically brings on to people who don't know anything about recovery, it brings on a negative, you know, they immediately close off what they might have been open to because the word alcoholic is equal to something negative.
My using, I really hid it a lot because I knew what it would look like and I knew what it felt like inside. To have the feeling of, if I was looking at someone else, at someone else's life and knowing that person was using narcotics, which is what I used, how would I feel about that woman and what would that say about her? So I was giving myself a lot of negative, you know, a lot of negative messages, the messages I thought society was giving me.
Mine was when I was a child, growing up being ashamed of this and that and things that were happening in my family. So I was ashamed to admit that I did have a problem. and look at all my issues because of the shame. And that was my number one thing in treatment when we did like a circle trying to, come out of, my sponsor or my counselor made a circle, like an inner tube. And that was the one thing that kept me from trying to grow and change and take a look at my issues because I was so ashamed to be honest.
I would spend money that I knew that I should be paying for rent or food or whatever. That money was going for something else, So it definitely controlled me.
With a child, I had to be very careful, and I hid it very well. A lot of people around me didn't know. People around me knew certain things about me, but they didn't really know that I was using. I don't know if they thought it was my personality or what, but I got very good at hiding, being secretive and hiding, and I think that that's a very destructive thing to learn as an addict, to hide and to be secretive. And I got so good at it that using the amount of narcotics that I used every day and working on it, no one knew. So for me, it's taken me many years to try to get beyond that hiding and that secretiveness of being bad.
For me, the fear that I had was that I wouldn't be able to get well. It wasn't so much that I cared if people knew, because I came from a family where alcoholism was already 2 generations back. So it wasn't so much of a stigma for me as it was the fact that I was afraid I was different and I wouldn't be able to get better. The people in my family had not gotten better at that point. So the alcoholic that I saw was the alcoholic that still drank. And so I was very much afraid. And then I was also afraid later on because of relationships. My husband drank, and I felt like, even when I was trying not to drink, if he was having a good time and going out, I didn't want to stay home.
Despite the real fears of admitting that she has developed an addiction to alcohol or drugs, there comes a time when a woman can no longer cover up what her disease is costing her, both to her family and herself.
It got so bad. My addiction got so bad. I was pawning off everything I owned. Everything that I've ever worked for was pretty much gone. I had booze bottles everywhere. I had drugs everywhere. It was just like, no. And I'm like laying on my floor just ready to die. I just wanted to die. I didn't see any other way to get out. I had pretty much burned my family. I felt like I'd burned bridges with like everybody in AA. But yet that was a lot of my addiction doing, because I was isolating myself and I was pushing people out of my life right and left. Anybody that offered me any help, I was just like, oh no, I'm fine, I can do it. Or I wouldn't let anybody really know where I was, or I wouldn't tell anybody completely the truth, because then they'd really think I was sick, because I knew how sick I was, and it was like, to verbalize it would be, oh my God, look at what's going on here.
It controlled a lot of my life as far as how I spent my money, what I chose to focus on. My priorities were completely out of whack. My priorities today are, a whole lot different than they were when I was, addicted. It would clearly controlled me from morning, noon, and night.
At that point, we literally had no money for food or anything. I remember like a couple of days before I had sold my car, and we had like done probably $1,000 worth of drugs in a day. After all that, we had, quit doing drugs for a while and, slept or whatever, took care of ourselves for, I don't know, which didn't happen very often, but I remember thinking, we don't even have money to go buy a can of pop. I remember thinking, I'm starving and I don't know where to go for food.
I had one instance where a woman from social services came and told me, she said, Mary, she said, I've been knowing this woman for quite a long time, and she said, we're kind of watching you, and we think that you're getting a little out of control here, and if things don't turn around, if you don't turn things around, we're going to take your kids. And there was no way I couldn't let that happen, and I didn't realize I had progressed that far. So that was a little nudge that let me know that I had really crossed over that invisible line, so to say, into addiction that I wasn't aware that I was in it.
I had got to the point where I was drinking in the mornings, and on my break I had little bottles in my car. I was waking up in my car in places I had no idea, where I was at, and it had just got really, my bottom of, being a drunk was just really living in my car and had lost everything, and I was pathetic. And you look at yourself in the mirror and you're going, what on earth are you doing? So I was like, I need some help. I think the very bottomest part of it was I couldn't write my own name, and I'd try and sign my name and I couldn't read it, and I was starting to lose my identity because I couldn't even physically fill out papers, or I couldn't do my job anymore. I was shaking so bad, and so I was like, I need some help.
I know when I heard that I could have lost my children, that's all I needed to hear.
Many barriers remain in the way of treating a woman with addiction. Ironically, those who have admitted their problem must continue to overcome obstacles within the very system set up to help them. Issues such as treatment eligibility, sexual orientation, children, and finances become additional burdens in the struggle for help.
The institutions of, medical hospitals and other places really, labeled you as weak, as incompetent, as capable, as competent as a mother, as incompetent as a woman, a lot of negative things. And you were in systems where you often, if you had any bad past experiences like rape, which are common to women, I hate to say that, but that's a common thing for women, you ended up in those institutions if you were addicted, and you had double negative instances happening. You were often in situations where you were victimized a second time by the things that had happened to you in the past, and by the fact that you were also an addict now in the system.
I tried to get into treatment, and I thought I was going to be leaving like the next Friday, okay, pack your bags, we're taking you in, we're going to get you some help, And so I went and I filled out the paperwork, and the lady's like, okay, we'll get back to you. And then, I wasn't eligible.
I know for lesbians going into treatment, it is very hard because you just can't talk about your personal life. And it's difficult to recover if you can't talk about your personal life. If you're terrified of discussing your partner, your relationships, how you exist, what is important to you, what is meaningful to you, that your family no longer may want to know you, all these important issues that really are a part of you being an alcoholic. The stresses on your life that add to your addictions and your alcoholism. If you can't talk about any of them, because they all interrelate with being a lesbian in some way, that's going to have a great deal of harm.
The way I was raised up, everybody in my family is addicted. So when I went to treatment, they were looking at me like So, and I still, there's still that kind of a division in between our family, because 9 out of 10 of them still drink today, and that's their business. I wish they would get help, but in the black community, you'll find that it's just a given. I mean, I was raised up from knee high, alcohol was in the family. Every celebration, holiday, birthday party, or whatever, I thought it was a normal thing. Little did I know that it was, a drug, a disease that will really take a hold of you and just destroy your life.
I was shaking still, and I wasn't eating very well, and she said, you know, how long have you been sober? And I said, oh no, she goes, when was your last drink? And I said, well, I looked at the calendar. I was like, about 22 days ago. She goes, oh, well, you don't need any help, you know. And right then and there, I didn't even, it was like a big wall, you know. And I thought, this is my last resort, you know, 3 strikes, you're out. Where do I go now? And then she actually told me, I asked her, I said, you mean if I were to go to the liquor store, get a 5th of whatever, drink it, and drive crazy in front of the police station, get a DWI, I could get into treatment tomorrow? She was like, yeah, probably.
There's no hope here if I do not get out of this relationship. When he went to detox, I needed to be in a safe place. I couldn't go to detox because we would have been in the same facility. So when I went out to interview with someone about getting into a treatment center, they were like, well, what's the problem? And I'll never forget, I'm sitting there with this lady, and I'm like, my husband's in detox. I can't go to detox.
I only went to one myself, and it was an extremely bad experience because it was with the VA system, the veterans system. And it was basically all men. So I walked into a room with 12 men who were all Vietnam veterans. You can imagine what treatment might be like in that situation. It was a horrifying experience. It was kind of like, oh my God, post-traumatic stress. We all had post-traumatic stress in common. That was one thing that was good. But as far as treatment went, I felt completely dominated by men and was really uncomfortable.
When I decided I'm going to break this chain here, and it starts here with me, you know, and I spoke with my mother, and she says, because me and her, I used to drink with her quite a bit during the week, and I went and told her, and I just came out of treatment, and she was happy for me because she knew that, you know, it was the best thing for me to do. And she pops open a can of beer. She says, here, Mary, you want a beer? I said, Mom, no, I told you I can't. I just can't. She says, well, you didn't have a problem with alcohol. You had problems with drugs. This is, well, actually, Mom, you know, alcohol is a drug, and so I'm not going to, you know, say which one I was having a problem with. I might as well say I only had a problem with hard liquor, with, you know, with brandy, and now I'm going to drink beer. And that's how she thought.
In recovery, a woman's journey has just begun. She now must regain her self-esteem, learn to believe in herself again, reconnect with family and friends, live independently, and care for herself and her children.
The biggest challenge a woman faces in recovery is trying to, and I feel like this is probably true for all women, not just lesbians, trying to rebuild her womanhood, trying to decide who she is as a woman and fit it into society and be comfortable in her own body and who she is. When we've become alcoholics, we've isolated ourselves so much we're not even connected to our bodies and who we are as women. We don't have any respect for ourselves as individuals or as women, and you have to rebuild that. You have to rebuild that respect for yourself.
Getting back her self-respect, liking herself again. It's really difficult to look in the mirror without being drunk or even being hungover. I mean, because you always have, you know, when you're using or even when you're suffering from using, you think, I can be better, you know, if I don't do this.
For me, the biggest challenges are continuing to work and be able to be at work and to raise my children and to be there, to be present for my children, not to just to be there, but to be present emotionally and spiritually for my children and financially. Those are the biggest issues in my recovery, I think. And staying connected, really staying connected with my friends and my family when I'm so tired from working and parenting. that I don't have enough energy to go to connect with people, to get back out at night, get in my car, or find a babysitter, or do those kinds of things. Those are the biggest challenges for me.
One of my biggest challenges was to have just the courage to go on, to move forward, to push myself into the positive direction. That was just, and a lot of days I get in a slump, but I still know that's what I need to do. Just to have the courage to push yourself, because you know you have to. You know, no one can do it for you. It's just, you gotta dig down some days and just do it, you know, it's hard.
The financial responsibility, because it seems like men's wages are way higher than women's, and feeling lonely when women are more feeling people than men. I find men can, you know, just kind of stuff things and not talk about them, and having like a father figure around a male, because children tend to listen to a male, like, you know, I don't know what, a male just has a really important part in a child's life. And I guess that's the way I see it.
Relationships are a special challenge to women in recovery. Many times a woman puts her partner's or her children's needs before her own, possibly jeopardizing everything she has worked so hard to achieve in sobriety.
Where I saw people fail after they'd been sober for some period of time was usually over relationships. They would either, and two things would happen, either the family had trouble with them coming back and assuming their role, which used to happen because, you know, mother had been the one who didn't really do anything, and when she tried to pick up her role again after being sober, that was sometimes difficult. The other thing was if the significant other still drank. You know, it's hard to maintain sobriety in the early years if you know you're fighting with someone who's drinking and you see that as a way out.
You know, the verbal abuse, the physical abuse, and I kept going back. You know, and I would hear, "I love you," and "I'm sorry," and "I'll never do it again," and "I can't live without you," and I felt like it's all my fault. It's all my fault he's not happy. It's all my fault that he lost his job. It's all my fault that he's back out there drinking. It's all my fault. I've got to fix him. You know, I've got to do something. Even though I was miserable and I was like, you know, didn't have any contact with my family, didn't have any contact with my friends, didn't have, you know, I wasn't going to meetings because I was out using, you know. And those were my choices because I was in that sick, twisted, you know, it was almost like I was powerless. I was not only powerless because I was using again, but I was powerless over my decisions, I felt like a slave to him and the addiction.
We can understand our addiction, we can understand alcoholism, we grasp on to the fact that, you know, this bottle or this joint wrecked our lives, took our families away, you know, caused abusive relationships. But we get back into a relationship for some reason when we get out of treatment, and 90% of the time I've seen a lot of women go back to using because they got involved in a relationship and their partner left them, or there was some cheating or whatever, and they end up relapsing because of him.
I think it's really difficult for people if they're in a bad situation, a bad marriage, maybe older kids that are in trouble, and they get help and are trying to do something for themselves and have to go back home into the same situation. It's difficult, and I didn't have to do that, so I was very fortunate. I had lots of supportive people around me, and I'm very grateful for that. I saw a lot of people that didn't make it.
All of my relationships, I found people who were willing to take care of me when I got drunk, cover for me when I couldn't, you know, do it.
Even though I knew I was, you know, clearly in a place where anything at any time, any moment, and real awful things could happen, if I was there with a man, then I felt a little bit safer. Not that it made it right, but I used that. I had a lot of different male friends. when I went into treatment, I was with a different partner. Now I'm married to a different man. So on either side of the fence, it was, a struggle going into treatment and dealing with those types of partner issues, and now being married and being clean and still dealing with my recovery on a daily, ongoing basis in a relationship. It's hard because that was another one of my excuses that I would use stress in a relationship.
So I guess I can speak from experience that, I got into a relationship like 6 months after getting out of treatment. Even though my rationality was I was in treatment for 1 year and 2 months. And then I finally got discharged, and then I went 6 months, and I knew this person, and we got involved, and it was just too soon, and I started worrying about his needs, and what he needed and what he wanted was more important than what Lana needed, what I needed to do to stay sober, what I needed to do to stay healthy and reach my goals. I made goals when I was in treatment. So I have to learn how to live by myself, with myself, and for myself, because I get lost, and that's difficult.
My first relationship, I was 17. I was with a man, and he was 18. I don't know. I was with a boy. But before, let's see, that lasted about, I guess, a year. I had taken LSD one time before, but with him, I experimented with LSD.
The last relationship I had, it was I who had to say, "You're not changing. You still want to take care of me, and I can't be taken care of anymore. I've got to fall on my face. I've got to fail, I've got to learn my lessons the hard way."
Being a parent can be both fulfilling and demanding. For a woman in recovery, motherhood is one of the most challenging roles she will play in her life. Her issues may include single parenting, financial responsibility, and serving as a role model for her kids. Yet many women stay sober and provide positive influences for their children.
I think for myself, being a parent and learning sobriety, becoming sober, was really difficult because I didn't know how to live my life independently. And I had to be taught all over again. Actually, in treatment, I learned how to be somewhat independent. Not completely, because I'm still learning today. It's real difficult. I have 5 children, and being sober now with children, I have to think about my children. All of my children's needs are before mine. And sometimes that gets really stressful, and my sobriety gets a little bit in danger because I'm so overwhelmed with 5 children and being a single parent that it's scary. So I think that's the difficult part about being in recovery and a parent, because you are learning a whole new way of living, and to take on responsibilities. And your children, if they live through that damage of drinking, and trying to undo what was done to them is another drastic or damaging thing to them. So it's really a real difficult thing.
I did have a son. He passed away, and before I came out as a lesbian, really came out as a lesbian, it was I hid it from everyone before then. I would never consider letting anyone know that I was either an alcoholic or that I was, a lesbian, because either one of them would have cost me my son. And the truth is that when I did come out as a lesbian, it did cost me my son. He was taken away, and he was given custody to his father. And my relationship with my son didn't improve until I stopped drinking and was able to write to him and talk to him. And it was very hard on him to accept the fact that I remember his experience with me was not that he was so upset that I was a lesbian, but he was extremely traumatized by the fact that I admitted I was an alcoholic.
I had to not use all the excuses that I used, to pick up, because that's what, in my mind anyway, those are my excuses. Things to deal with the kids, just life in general, but mainly issues with kids. You know, I didn't have enough money, or, you know, I didn't know how to tell them the right things. They didn't come with an instruction manual, so it was real frustrating.
It's really difficult when there are crises happening in my life with my daughter. I'm still the person that has to take care of it. I'm the person that has to figure out, if there's no money, what's going to happen.
Often drinking and the drugs did become more important than the very child that we loved. It was very hard for him. And it's very hard on, you know, on me to be able to accept the fact that I did that I would put my son second to drugs and alcohol.
My sponsor knew a woman from out of town who has opened this women's facility all on her own, did all this. I mean, just a beautiful place that they were willing to take me. The minute I got there, I felt comfortable. I had a little bit of fear, but I knew that I was making the right choice. And a lot has changed since then. I think that we dealt with a lot of, at the treatment center, we dealt with a lot of women's issues.
I was just driving like 85 miles an hour, and I was going to go home, and I didn't want to drink. I didn't know who to call, and so I went to a meeting, and I was just like, and normally I don't think I had shared yet at this point, and I went in, and I just was like, I just threw it all up on the table, you know. It's like, this is what's happened, da 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 da, you know, and I need help, you know, and I was just searching for, I was desperate, pretty much.
Women who are in early recovery really need to have a good support network, and part of that support network really needs to be their healthcare provider. Well, first of all, I think it's real important that women be upfront with their healthcare providers and say, I'm in recovery, and gauge that health professional's comfort with that. And I think probably the most critical time there is right when they say that to the healthcare professional, what kind of reaction do they get, even a nonverbal reaction. Does the healthcare professional tense up and maybe then try and cover for him or herself? Or is the healthcare professional immediately warm, understanding, even enthusiastic about having a patient like this in his or her practice? Can that healthcare professional let you know that they're aware of resources, they're aware of issues that you'll be dealing with? Is this the kind of person you're going to feel comfortable coming to if you're having a hard time, and know that you're not going to be judged, but you're going to be cared for? Also, for women who are pregnant during this process, it's real important that they have healthcare professionals who are not just focused on the well-being of the fetus and the baby, but who really understand that the woman is more than an incubator for the fetus or the baby, that woman has special needs that really need tending to. Many physicians are aware of the disease concept, but really haven't fully internalized the lack of blame for people who have these issues. Some physicians are sincerely caring about patients with this, but really haven't learned how actually to help them. And people with alcohol and drug issues need more than someone who just cares. They need someone who can really help them through the process of recovery, know where to send them if they are facing certain difficulties. And sadly, most physicians are just not aware of those kinds of resources. It's very common that health issues will pop up, either related to the substance use or perhaps completely separate, but often the dynamics of recovery mean that there's something that the healthcare professional really needs to understand about recovery and the impact that it's having on the healthcare issue, treatment, and so forth. So it's real important for women to find a healthcare professional who really understands recovery, what kind of needs they may have, what kind of medicines are and are not appropriate to prescribe for women who are in recovery. Obviously, nobody with these problems wants to relapse, but people need to be aware that this is very common, and their healthcare professionals need to really approach this constructively. If women are feeling judged because they are in relapse or afraid of relapse, then that's probably the wrong healthcare professional to be seeing. They need to be comfortable with a healthcare professional who wants to know when they're having a tough time, wants to know if they're starting to slip, wants to know if they're in a relapse, not to get angry, not to judge, but to really extend a helping hand.
Creating a community for those in recovery requires sharing with one another to overcome the hardships of alcoholism and drug addiction. These 7 women would like to give one thought to those who are still struggling with addiction.
If you care anything about your life, your children, you know, this is the time now to turn it around, you know, to ask for help, you know, because you can't do it yourself. You know, I know I couldn't. And my way that I was trying got me in a world of mess, so just asking for help and surrounding yourself with positive people that are in recovery. That was a big one for me too, to make sure I'm where they are.
I guess the thing I'd like to say to women who are still suffering is, I know that place of despair where you can't stop drinking and you can't imagine living without drinking. And you're thinking in your head that you want to die, but you don't have the strength to die. Or maybe you're already ready to die and take your own life. And I guess the biggest thing I'd like to say is that there is a place where you can get beyond that. If you can put down the bottle, come to something like AA, give it a chance. It may not be everything you need. Just take what you can, leave the rest. You know, I didn't start this program jumping up and down with joy with all the stuff, especially the higher power stuff. I was like, that's a bunch of crap. But I stuck it out. I just went because I was so desperate. There's nothing more desperate than that feeling. I remember it. I can still recall it. So if you can just remember that there's an option, there is a life beyond drinking.
I think for me, learning in recovery that I was not a bad person, that I was a lovable person. Recovery for me has opened up that sense of that someone is watching over me, that someone is connected to me, that I really belong to the human race, that I belong in a community, that I belong to the world, and that my children do.
It's like fear of the unknown. And I try to explain to people that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and if you accept it and, you know, like I always like to take the negative and recycle it positively. And if you can portray that to, you know, leading by example, it's like, you know, yeah, I was, you know, for 31, I could have had and been a lot of different places in my life. But I'm okay with where I'm at today because I had to go through what I had to go through to get here. And then I'm still just a baby, you know, anyways, in recovery and in life, because I plan on living a long time.
The most important thing is tell someone, you know. Tell someone that you have a problem and that you're afraid, and get help. You know, it's never as bad as you think it's going to be. You need to be patient. So I'd say, you know, talk to someone, you know, make a call, ask for help, be patient. You know, it works.
Well, when you're hurting and you're sad and you're feeling lonely and you're feeling like the end of the world, you know, look up a number, you know, 1-800 numbers, domestic violence numbers, AA numbers. There's so many resources available out there for women who are still struggling. And, you know, what are you going to lose by taking, you know, picking up the phone and making that call, because they don't know who you are, and you just might find yourself feeling a lot better. Doesn't mean that you have to commit yourself to a treatment center or commit yourself to, you know, 30 days doing this and that. It's just that one phone call, because I can guarantee you'll learn one thing from that phone call, or talking with somebody that you might know in sobriety. You will learn something, and sometimes that's the way it works. Little by little by little, you know, you keep getting information and it'll stay with you.
Love yourself enough to know that you deserve the best life has to offer. And don't settle. Just don't settle. This life is a much better life than it is out there trying to numb out or run away from or escape from whatever you're really hurting about inside. Get that core issue. Because it's something, maybe you can't see right now, but fight for it because you're worth it.